Hello, and welcome back to another Monster Monday, a series where I draw a creature from D&D and I talk about its lore and its mythology and what it's like to fight in-game as well. For these videos, I like to use your suggestions for monsters that you'd like to see my illustration interpretation of, and hear the lore and mythology of, whether they're in D&D or not. So if there's a creature that you'd really love to see explored in video form, or just see reimagined through another illustrator's perspective, so make sure to leave that down below in the comments section so I can add it to my to-draw list and let my patrons over on Patreon vote on it this month. That's what an absolute ton of you guys did to determine the topic of today's video, which is going to be on Fomorians, Irish mythological giants. But the first person to suggest this was Rai Toiro, all the way back on my Bullywug video about 3 years ago now. So you've had a long time to wait, but I'm so glad that we finally get to cover these fantastic creatures. And you've waited long enough, so let's get started with today's video. Fomorians, in D&D's terms, are horrifically deformed, magically cursed and mutated giants, whose greed and selfishness has been drawn out from their hearts to be magically reflected on their outer appearance. They're essentially giants who have been subjected to the shallow Hal treatment, if any of you remember that movie. Once, long ago, the Fomorians were a race of giants who were extremely skilled in magic, beautiful in appearance, mighty in stature and gait, graceful in behaviour and admirable in attitude. Their cities were ornate and wonderful to behold, held together with complex enchantments and carved with arcane tools. They lived in harmony with the elves and fey creatures of the ancient world. But with arcane knowledge comes a tendency to grasp for yet more power, and for the Fomorians, this would be their undoing. It's not clear what event exactly sparked the now famous greed of the Fomorians, but their lust for magic spiraled into an obsession, and they began to hunger for more, addicted to the energies and abilities that magic allowed. They grew intensely jealous of the creatures of the Feywild and amassed great armies of their own kind to march on the plain of Feyri and seize the magic of fairy kind by force. Now, foolishly, the Fae are often underestimated when compared to the more immediately, obviously and extravagantly, wastefully powerful creatures of other planes, like those of demons and angels. But they are no less mighty in their own way, and this would be a lesson that the Fomorians would come to learn and to regret not respecting for the rest of all of time. In the Feywild, the cruel intentions of their hearts, their selfishness, and their greed twisted and warped their bodies. They were cursed by the Fae into twisted abominations, to have their internal malice and cruelty inflicted on their own bodies and minds like a dark mirror. Their limbs fused or multiplied, their facial features twisted and changed position all over their faces. Bones protruded from their skin, warts, boils and tumours encrusted their flesh, imprisoning them in agony, and their once brilliant minds were torn from them, leaving only a fraction of their cognitive brilliance. All that remained of their once immense magical power was usually at least one bulging, cruel-looking eye, frozen in the hate of that moment, ever watchful and ever seeking a victim onto whom they hope to visit a fraction of the torture that they experience every day. A very potent lesson in respecting the Fae indeed. This punishment has not taught them any other valuable lessons, however. They're still greedy, cruel and vengeful. They despise Fae creatures, always quick to punish elves, centaurs, satyrs, pixies and other adventurers who stink of the perfumed flowers of the Feywild, hoping that hurting them will bring themselves some kind of vengeful satisfaction, no matter how short-lived. They hide deep below the earth, surviving on meals of centipedes, bats, and other creatures who dwell in their now ruined former cities. The magic which held them together crumbled and dissipated long ago, when the minds who enchanted them in the first place dulled with this curse. Their only allies are each other, the fungi who grow in their once illustrious homes, and those who share their hatred of the Fae. They are slave masters, as most giants tend to be, adding to the ever-expanding list of creatures who enslave travellers in the Underdark, finding company among the Drow, the Druagar, and Mind Flayers, all who hide from the light of the surface. While Fomorians have been a part of Dungeons & Dragons since its very first edition, arriving as monsters that adventurers might face through the Monster Manual 2, released in 1983, they actually have a long and storied history in real-world mythology. We've talked about giants plenty of times on this channel, and the complex and ancient origins of these creatures throughout various mythologies, all of which likely stem from ancient Norse legends and similarly ancient civilizations. But the Fomorians in particular, or as potentially I should say, the Fomori, the ancient plural term for these particular giants, come to us from ancient Irish legends. The etymology of their name is still debated, but what we do know is the prefix fo in Old Irish means below, lower or beneath, things of that nature. Muir means the sea, but the second part of their name could also be derived from Moor, with an O rather than a U, which can mean things like large, big, giant in other words, and literally means what you think it does. It's the origins of the word moor in modern English. So a single Fomorach or several Fomoraic in Middle Irish probably meant something in the neighbourhood of the giants from far below, the ones from beneath the sea, or the giants under the waves. Very similar to their representation in D&D, the Fomorians of Irish mythology are malevolent, demonic earth spirits, giant creatures who clashed with the Tuatha De Danann, a group of beings loosely considered gods or benevolent spirits, a pantheon of deified entities who were worshipped by early settlers on the island. These two clans had very similar relationships to the Norse gods like Thor, Odin, Freya and so on, and the Jotun, if I can be so bold as to draw parallels between Irish and a far more popularly studied ancient mythology. The Fomorians represented the destructive powers of nature, the chaotic, entropic, and unsympathetic elements of reality, and the Tuatha De Danann represented civilization, stability, and order. Despite their similarities in relationship and similar stories to Norse legends, it's believed that these massive and terrifying creatures may have actually represented the Vikings in Irish mythology. They came from the oceans as pirates and raiders, riding the waves from their inky depths, raiding and destroying towns and villages by the seashore, a reality that would have been all too familiar to the people of Ireland at the time, who were constantly plagued by Viking raids. Also, like the D&D interpretation, the Fomorians were depicted as monstrous, deformed creatures, as cruel in appearance as they were in spirit, but their appearances were more specific and less humanoid, something which I hope to incorporate into my illustration today, according to the Leborna Huidre, a name that I've likely absolutely butchered, but thankfully is also known as the Book of Dun Cow, an Irish manuscript written on vellum, an animal skin membrane sort of paper-like stock that many ancient manuscripts were inscribed on. Dating to the 12th century, these creatures have one eye, one leg, and one arm, and usually have the body of a man and the head of a goat with great horns. Certain named Fomorians have a very contrary appearance though, and are said to be darkly beautiful. Elatha, king of the Fomorians, son of Dalbeath, which means the god shaped by fire, is said to have once been the god of the sun or the moon perhaps, and this beauty from this time being a god is still reflected in his appearance. He's described in the same text as being a, quote, beautiful Miltonic prince of darkness with golden hair, and is also described as riding the waves in, quote, a sea vessel of silver, himself having the appearance of a young man with yellow hair wearing clothes of gold, end quote. Bres, Elatha's son, was also a Fomorian, but he had another name. He was often known as Eochu Bres, the latter half of his name meaning violent things like uproar, fight, or slam, and the former word meaning beautiful horseman, a very contradictory name unless Bres really liked to fight beautiful horsemen, but I doubt that's what that meant. Hello, I'm sorry to interrupt, and I'll be as quick as I can. I wanted to take this opportunity to ask for your help and to thank those who are already helping me. I absolutely love what I get to do here, but it is very tough. It takes a massive amount of time. It is in itself basically a full-time job, whether I'm researching monsters, which takes days at a time, sifting through books and pages of the internet, spending days illustrating monsters, recording, painstakingly editing both the audio and video for these things, managing social media accounts, and so on. Basically, it's a passion project, and it takes up a lot of time, and while I don't demand your help, it would be wonderful if you appreciate these videos, if you could. Now that could just be hitting the subscribe button. I know that 50% of the people who watch my videos aren't subscribed, and it's a massive, massive morale boost. I can't even tell you how much when that subscriber count increases. We've been on 15,000 subscribers for about a year, and I've always dreamed of this channel reaching 100,000. I really appreciate all of you who are watching right now and who are subscribed, but to call this channel's rise from obscurity meteoric would only count if the meteor was being dragged through a beach of gravel by a very determined but also very slow halfling. So I'd appreciate your help. If you don't want to miss any of these videos, just subscribing, because it's a massive boost. Further to that, my patrons over on Patreon actually help to fund these videos. As I say, I basically spend the equivalent time of a full-time job on this, and these guys are what literally keeps the light on in my house, helps to pay my bills, helps to feed me, my wife, and our adorable little pup Myrtle, helps to pay for the drawing software that I get to draw, pays for the internet that allows me to research all these monsters, pays for drawing tablets so I can actually illustrate things. So if you'd be kind enough to check out my Patreon, I would really appreciate it. At the moment there are 4 pledge levels. There's the Copper Fiend pledge level, who for £1 or $1.50 I think it is per month, get a shout out on my live stream that I do at the end of every month. I get to thank each and every single one of them. Every single person at this pledge level and above also gets entered into a Commission Corner raffle, so I pick one person at random every single month who's on my Patreon list to get a full character illustration. And they will get to vote on polls to determine what Monster Mondays come up next, and other tricky decisions that I can't decide, like what t-shirt to do next, what player species to illustrate next, and so on. They really get to have a driving seat in how this channel is run and what content I get to make. At £5 or $7.50 a month, there are the Silver Archfey, who get everything that the Copper Fiends get. They get access to Patreon exclusive videos where I talk about my world lore, talk about my adventures and my campaigns, and anything else that they'd like to see. But they get an extra video more than people who are on YouTube every single month, and they get a shout out each month on my Monster Monday videos. And this month they are Nicholas G. Silver, Duck Quack, George Punton, Nappin Camo, Yorick Beast, Jonathan Foster, Benjamin Colburn, The Smiling Sadist, Ethan Dibby, Skyrush Soul, Nathan Stratton, Amanda and Jake Westfall, Xavier Heatherwick, Braxton Hudson, Bartlegruff the Great, Halfie Wolf, Peter Belf, Max Schluter, Ryan H., Tim Kleemer, Steve Harrison, Dan Waterman, Styrax, It's Just Avi, Colby Monroe, Sam Hickson, Brandon Kerr, Darth Caetana, Trevor Traub, Max Copeland, Oliver Thorvald Mellock, AJ, Dominique Jolly, Tamerling, Aldrin, Christian Palmer Smith, Jellypig, Raptor Dio, Brandon Wilkinson, Nicholas Bayer. At £20 or $29 I believe it is, the Golden Celestial Pledge get everything that's come before, and they also get digital prints of all of my illustrations that I do each month for every video. So they get a whole cluster of illustrations every month. And finally the Great Old Ones at £50 per month, or roughly $71, get access to everything that's come before, and we get to have a one-on-one chat each month, where either we just shoot the breeze, talk about campaign ideas, homebrew some things, workshop ideas, or I can share my screen and make personal illustrations just for you while we chat. So thank you so much if you choose to do that, if you choose to check out my Patreon, or even just subscribe. Like I say, it really keeps me going, and I'm really thankful for all of your help in getting to do this literal dream job. But I think I've talked for long enough. Hopefully I've not disturbed your interest in the video otherwise, so I'll let you get back to it, and thank you very much. Bress was actually considered a king of the Tuatha De Danann, these ordered, deified gods who opposed the Fomorians, but he was thoroughly unpopular and hated by the mortals and his godly pantheon, and far more highly regarded by his Fomorian allies, while he is described more like Thor by being a sort of beautiful, conventionally masculine and rowdy, youthful prince. It seems he's received more like Loki, a troublemaker, a nuisance, and so on in Irish mythology compared to the Norse. Different cultures value different things apparently, and it's likely that this rowdy, youthful spirit would not have been received very well by the Irish people, certainly not expected of someone in a leadership role. The beauty of these rulers of the Fomorians likely stems from dynastic and treaty-like marriages between these two factions, filtering down throughout the generations, diluting the monstrous and vilified nature of the Fomorians into a more conventionally humanoid appearance, like the Irish gods. This is something that I wanted to have appear in my illustration here. I loved the idea of the goat heads from the actual Irish mythology. I really truly dislike the way that they are depicted in D&D generally, as just these sort of warty, lumpy giants with one large eye and another sort of slightly closed eye, especially when the opportunity to make a cyclops, something with a singular eye in the center of their head, is available. So something to do with a kind of goat head and this one massive arcane eye seems like a really good idea. But I still wanted to make them sort of seem twisted and mutated, to have them fit in with the D&D lore, that they were cursed in some way. I think that's a really interesting way to have these creatures be different and stand out from other giants you might use. So I decided to have some of their limbs be fused into their bodies in very uncomfortable and painful looking ways, and perhaps to kind of go down this route of having one usable arm and one usable leg, because the Fomorians in Irish mythology only had one of each type of limb. But I thought, in order to make them functional, in order to make them not have any distinguishable differences in their stat sheet, maybe I could draw upon the ancient magic of these people. Maybe they have forgotten the once amazing magics and magical technology that they had access to, but there's just enough of the remnants of what they had in order to allow them some facsimile of the limbs that they're missing. Perhaps there are crystals which manifest a spare sort of spiritual arm or a leg for these creatures that are part of the armor and clothing that they would wear. We're told that they tend to just wear rags and maybe remnants of their past civilizations, but their intelligence has been diluted and damaged so much that they are no longer able to access quite the level of magic and quite the level of ornateness and beauty of craftsmanship that they once had access to. We're told in their stat block that all of the magic that they once had distilled into this one angry eye, something which they have in common with Nothics, and seems to be a bit of a trope among cursed creatures in D&D who have tried to seek out too much magic. As we would expect from these massive, huge creatures, their challenge rating 8 huge giants with a chaotic evil alignment, they are incredibly strong, wielding a great club. I'm not sure at this point, I'm actually talking about this before I do this illustration, whether or not I'm going to give this creature a weapon or not, but I imagine this huge mutated arm is kind of what I'm picturing as something which they could use as their great club attack. They have a great club attack which deals 3d8 plus 6 bludgeoning damage, and they can use this evil eye, focusing all their latent magical power, all of the magic that they had over their ancient lives, into a sort of psionic eye ray, focusing all of their hate into a 68 damage psychic attack. And these creatures get to make a great club attack and this ranged psychic eye attack as part of their multi-attack per turn, so they get to do this every single turn. In addition, they have an ability called Curse of the Evil Eye. This is something that comes up a lot in ancient Celtic cultures. In Scottish and Irish mythology, there's something called the Evil Eye, and luck is a very tangible thing that comes up over and over and over again. The evil eye was sort of like an old curse that you could unwittingly inflict on someone else by literally scowling at them. Your evil intentions towards someone might unknowingly inflict them with a curse. In the Fomorians' case, they are quite happy to pass on this curse, and that's literally what it does. They get to use this once, recharging in a long or a short rest. And when they do this, instead of having access to their multi-attack, they just do a single evil eye attack. But this passes on some of the mutations and some of the agony that the Fomorian experiences to the person that it targets. If someone fails their charisma saving throw to avoid the damage of this attack, then in addition to taking the traditional 68 psychic damage, they also have their movement speed halved as their bodies deform and distort to look more like a Fomorian's, and they truly understand the pain that these creatures are in. But these are fantastic creatures to use. They have civilizations, they are intelligent enough, they speak both giant and undercommon. I'm not quite sure where they fit into the ordning or where they would have fit in giant society. It's very likely that they are shunned now, but in D&D their former magic, their civilization, their technology is described as being almost like Atlantis-like. It's sort of seen as this civilization, this great civilization that was brought low by greed, and perhaps they could have been quite high up in the ordning, intentionally forgotten by those who now dominate it. But they still live in those cities, those crumbling ruins of their own cities, and they're still intelligent enough to have a society, to trade, to enslave, I suppose, to worship, to learn, and so on, but they're in too much pain to become fully fledged spellcasters any longer, just firing their hate out of their eyes at nearby players, something which I hope you will have the good fortune to avoid. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed today's video. I hope you enjoyed today's illustration. And if you did, make sure to leave a like down below, perhaps favorite this video and share it with the rest of your party. I've noticed that only half of the people who watch these videos, literally 50% of you guys, are subscribed, which is wonderful that those of you who have subscribed have done so. But if you really want to help the channel out, I'd really appreciate those of you who have not subscribed to click the little subscribe button so A, you don't miss any videos, and B, I feel very validated for making this content. That would be really wonderful. I've been making these videos for 4 years now, and we hit 15,000 subscribers about a year ago, and unfortunately we're still there, so I would really love to see the channel hit 20,000 subscribers. I mean, I'd really love to see it hit 100,000 subscribers, but I can curb my dreams. I'm just excited to see what your help can bring to the channel, so thank you so much. Until next time, basically just don't venture into the Underdark. There seems to be just horrible, horrible things down there. But if you do, and you meet a Fomorian, make sure you don't have any elves in the party, because they're likely to get extremely angry and jealous with you. And until next time, happy monster hunting.